Hello and welcome to another Retfurb video. Today we're looking at a Leak 30 stereo which is going to be refurbishing the front fascia panel. The lower black section is quite worn, as you can see, and also quite a bit of the lettering has come off, so I'm going to do my best to replicate this as best as I can and try and make it look as close to the original as possible. So let's get to the video. So the first thing we need to do is remove the main casing. This is just done by removing the single screw on the back of it. Once the screw is removed, you can then slide the casing off from the back. You then need to feed the wire through as you do this. So just before we go any further and remove any more parts, I just thought I would show the inside of this amplifier. You can see that it's really well populated with parts, quite a lot more than some of the ones that I've worked on previously. A lot of the parts are a lot older. Obviously this is between 65 and 67 if I'm correct. So a lot of these capacitors look a lot different than some more modern, even 70s, 80s stuff. That's not to say that you don't see them at all in that era, it's just that it's less common. Here I'm just removing all the front controls off the front panel. This is just done by unscrewing a small little grub screw underneath, and then you can just pull them off. Next, to remove the locking nuts from around the knob controls. Now that the nuts are removed, we can look at undoing the two screws on either side that hold the fascia panel on. With the way that this amplifier is manufactured, it's got solder points on the light bulb which is mounted onto the front panel, and also the two switch controls that are on the front panel, they've both got solder on them as well. So to remove the front panel, you need to unsolder this first. You could possibly try to prise open the switch backings before you did it, but I think it'd be too difficult to get in there. I don't think you'd do it, so this is the best way I think to do it, to unsolder it. Obviously there is quite a lot of wires in there, so I just made a note of which wires went where on a bit of paper before I did this. So now that all the wires are removed from the back of the switches and the light bulb, the front panel is now released and can come off from the rest of the case. The first thing I need to do now is remove the switches, and this involves just prising open the little tabs, and then you can get the backing plate off the switch and then the actual switch button itself. So on the video this will seem a bit back to front because on the next bit you'll see the button still in there. It's only purely because I was cutting that beforehand, but ideally you do want to remove the buttons first. I will be doing the rest of the work after this is done with the buttons removed, so you'll see them back out again shortly. Now we can look at rectifying the text that's damaged on the front panel. I think it was the stereo 30, the main part that had to be done, the mic lettering and the tape amp, and I think it was the balance at the bottom. That was the four parts which had damage to the text. So I've done it on water slide decal paper again, which is clear water slide decal paper. So you print the black on it, you won't see the backing. You'll see a slight edge where it is when it's fitted. But what we'll do is we'll fit that on there, and then we'll give it a coat of clear over the top, which will then seal it in, and then it will hide the edges a little bit more than what it would have before. You can see on the stereo 30 text how easy that did flake off. There was a little bit on the edge which took a little bit more rubbing, which I just used a plastic end of a pen just to get that off without scratching the front panel. So, you know, part of it is on there pretty good, but the rest of it not so. Here I'm just dabbing a little bit of water in the area just before I put the decal on, purely because sometimes when you do it, it sticks quickly and then you can't move it, whereas you do it like this, you'll be able to move it around a little bit first. Makes it a little bit harder when you've got to dry it and try not to move the decal as you're doing it, but it's not too bad. This is the best way of doing it. I've just moved it into position with the tweezers and then carefully dried it with a tissue. Obviously just trying to not move it too much as I'm doing it. So as you can see, it's come out pretty well. Obviously it's difficult to replicate it exactly the same because of the method that's used to put it on compared to how it was done originally. Unfortunately I can't replicate that. This is the only way that I can really do it. It's too small to cut it out of vinyl and stick it on as a sticker, so doing it like this I think it's come out quite well. And now onto the balance text, exactly the same process with this one. So we just use the water to slide it on, dry it off, and that's it. So to make these decals, it was easy enough to do. The clear transfer paper I think I bought off Amazon a while back. I got quite a bit of it, so it always comes in handy for doing little projects like this. I can't remember the exact make of it, but I can look that up if anyone would like to know. Just leave a comment. And then all I did is design the text on the computer. I just matched the font as best as I can. You can actually use, there's a couple of websites, I can't remember the name of them, but if you put in find font, you can actually take a picture and put it onto the website and it will then search for the font which is similar, which is what I did, and that's how I found these fonts that are quite close. So the only thing I would say, the Stereo 30 was pretty much spot on. I wouldn't say it was exactly, but it was very close. The other text for the smaller ones, the font was good, but I didn't space out the lettering enough as much as the originals. So when I looked at it after, I was a little bit annoyed with myself that I didn't do that, but it still looks good, it still matches it. It's just the spacing of the letters could have done with being a slightly bit more wider. Now it's time to do something about the lower black section. So I've just got a bit of Scotch-Brite, which I'm going to clean off the flakiness as much as I can beforehand. Ideally I should have done this before I put the decals on, but I didn't, so I just got to be careful around them before I seal them in. But I'm just going to go over a bit of Scotch-Brite, clean it up, clean off any marks best I can. Obviously the upper section with the text on, I can't really go around that because of the fact that it's got the text on and I end up rubbing it off. I do go around a few bits where there's a bit of staining, which it gets it off very gently, and that seems to work quite well. Here I'm going to use some fine line masking tape just to mask out the lower section to paint the black first. I'm using the fine line because it leaves a better edge. If you use normal masking tape you run the risk of it bleeding underneath, so this is the better option for something like this. So this is the result of the bottom part, which has now been sprayed in black. I've just used a matte black aerosol to do this. First of all I put an adhesion promoter on there just to help it stick to the old surface. And now I've got to remove the black from the lettering on the Leak logo at the bottom. I'm just going to do this with a bit of 1500 sandpaper, which will then also key it up for the lacquer coat to go on top. So when I applied the black, I just built up the layers. I put on some light coats, not too light that it'd make it dusty, but just enough to cover it, and then just built the layers up that way. Here I'm just making the wet and dry sandpaper wet and just rubbing over the surface carefully just to take the paint off the Leak logo, so then it will expose the metal underneath and then you'll see it obviously through the black like it was originally. I'm also using the tweezers just to go around some of the edges because the sandpaper sort of won't get into it. So the tweezers with the sharp edge will just get into any sort of bits which are a little bit pitted on the metal. So you can see that came out quite well, so now it's ready to have the lacquer coat put on it. And this is the panel now being lacquered. I've used a matte aerosol lacquer for this. I actually found one in Toolstation which seems to do the job pretty well. So I didn't want to go gloss with the finish on this one because it wasn't really that gloss to start with. So I thought put a matte lacquer finish over it. It'll seal in those lettering that I've done with the water slide decals. It'll seal in the black. And I think it gives quite a good original look to it. Obviously, like I say many times, not exactly the same as original because they do it in different ways, but I've got it as close as I can using the products that are readily available. So now it's time to put the front panel back on the main unit and solder all the wires back into those switches. Obviously this takes a while to do, so it's been cut down for the video because the main interest is actually refurbing the front panel on this one. So now that all the wires are soldered back in place, we can look at screwing the front panel back onto the main case. This includes screwing the lock nuts back on for the knob controls. And now just fitting on the knob controls. This is done with one small grub screw which holds it in place. So these small round caps that go on the knob controls, they'd come off when I removed them, so I'm just going to put a bit of super glue on there just to stick them back in place. And that's just about it. That's all the fit I've done now. As you can see, it's come out really well. I'm really happy with it. I'd also be interested to see what you think about the refurb and the process. All of this just tidies up the unit, makes it look a lot more presentable. Obviously before, with the flaky lettering, it just let it down. Now it looks great again. You can see here on the top left, this is a pre-refurb video, so you can just see the difference, especially on the black lower section. You can see obviously the lettering which has been restored, so it looks a lot better than before. Thanks again for taking the time to watch the video, it's really appreciated. Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.